You can have two working eyes, perfect vision, glasses if you need them, and still walk through your entire life blind. There is a kind of blindness that has nothing to do with your eyeballs and everything to do with whether you can actually perceive what is happening around you before it happens to you. And if you stick with me for the next few minutes, you are going to understand something that changes how you read your whole life from here on out. You're going to understand why some people seem to dodge disaster before it ever shows up at their door, why some people wake up out of a dead sleep already knowing which decision to make, and why other people, good people, smart people, keep getting blindsided by the same kind of situation over and over again like it's following them. It comes down to one thing: whether you have actually received what the Bible calls the gift of sight. There is a difference, and once you see that difference, you cannot unsee it. So keep watching, because I'm about to walk you through exactly how this gift works, where it shows up first in your life, and how you get it back if you feel like you lost it somewhere along the way. There's a story tucked into the book of Luke that most people read too fast to notice what's actually being said. A blind man is sitting on the side of the road outside Jericho, begging, because that's what a person does when they can't see where they're going. They stay on the margins. They ask for help just to survive the day. The blind man hears a crowd moving past him and asks what's going on, and someone tells him Jesus of Nazareth is walking by. So he starts shouting, and people around him tell him to be quiet, and he shouts louder. Eventually Jesus stops, has the man brought to him, and asks him directly what he wants. And here's the detail almost nobody catches. The man does not say, "Open my eyes." He says, "I want to see." Now that sounds like the same request, but completely different words, and the difference matters more than it looks like on the surface. His eyes weren't necessarily shut. He wasn't asking for his eyelids to move. He was asking for something deeper than that. The actual capacity to perceive, to understand, to know what was true. And Jesus answers him by telling him his faith has healed him and that he can now see. Not, "Your eyes are open." He can see. Think about how strange that is for a second. You can walk around with your eyes wide open every single day of your life and still not have this thing the man was asking for. You can be staring directly at a situation, a relationship, a job, a decision, a person's true character, and see absolutely nothing real about it. Meanwhile, someone else looks at the exact same situation and reads it correctly in about 4 seconds. That is not intelligence. That is not even experience, necessarily. That is sight, in the deeper sense. And it is something you either have access to or you don't. I want you to think about the people in your own life who seem to have this. Maybe it's someone who, before anyone else caught on, sensed something was wrong with a business deal and backed out weeks before it collapsed. Maybe it's a parent who looked at a person their child was dating and knew, just knew, something wasn't right, long before anything came out into the open. Maybe it's someone who walked away from a job offer everyone told them was a mistake to turn down, and 6 months later that company laid off half its staff. Was that luck? Sometimes. But often it's something else. It's a kind of internal radar that picked up on signals the rest of us were too distracted, too flattered, or too hopeful to notice. That radar is what we're talking about tonight, and the reason it matters so much is that it doesn't run on guesswork. According to Scripture, it runs through very specific channels, and if you know what those channels are, you can actually start paying attention to the ones already active in your life instead of missing them completely. The first channel, and probably the most overlooked one in a culture that treats sleep as nothing more than downtime for the body, is dreams. Most of us have been trained to think of a dream as leftover static from the day, your brain cleaning out the junk drawer while you rest. And sometimes that's exactly what it is. But Scripture treats sleep as something far more active than that. In the book of Job, there's a verse that says God speaks to people in more than one way, and that one of those ways happens specifically in dreams, in visions in the night, when deep sleep falls on a person and they are lying on their bed. In other words, the moment your body finally stops fighting for control and your conscious mind steps back, something else has room to speak. Whether or not that lands with you spiritually, think practically for a second about how many people have told you their biggest breakthroughs, their best decisions, their sudden clarity about a relationship or a career move, came to them not while they were grinding through a spreadsheet at their desk, but the moment they woke up. There's a reason for that. When your guard comes down, so does the noise. Here's why this matters more than it sounds like it should. A lot of people quietly believe that dreams are either meaningless or, on the opposite end, that every single one carries some coded message they need to decode like a puzzle. Neither of those extremes is helpful. The point isn't to obsess over every dream you have or to build your entire life around symbolism. The point is to stop dismissing the ones that leave a residue. You know the difference. Most dreams evaporate the second your feet hit the floor. But every once in a while you have one that stays with you all day, that keeps surfacing in the back of your mind during a meeting or a drive, that you find yourself telling someone about hours later because you can't quite shake it. That residue is the signal. It's not asking you to become a mystic overnight. It's asking you to take 5 minutes with a notebook before you reach for your phone and write down what you remember while it's still fresh, because clarity like that fades fast, and most people lose it before breakfast is even on the table. I know a woman who spent 2 years building a small skincare business out of her kitchen. She had a partner lined up, papers basically ready to sign, everybody around her excited for her, including her. 2 nights before the signing, she had an unusually vivid dream. In it, she was standing in her own store, watching her products get pulled off the shelves one by one while her partner stood outside, laughing on the phone with someone else. She woke up, unsettled in a way she couldn't explain, because on paper nothing was wrong. The numbers worked. The contract was fair. But she couldn't shake it. She waited a week, quietly, and had a friend who worked in finance take a second look at the partner's other business dealings. It turned out the partner was already being investigated for misusing funds from a completely different venture, information that hadn't gone public yet and that she had no rational way of knowing. She didn't sign. 18 months later, the partner's other business collapsed under fraud charges. Now, was that dream a courtroom transcript handed to her overnight? No. It was a signal. It was her spirit picking up on something her conscious mind hadn't gathered enough evidence to explain yet, communicated in the only language available while she was asleep, which is pictures and feeling. That is what this channel does. It doesn't always hand you a headline. Sometimes it hands you a feeling in your gut the next morning that you can't shake, and your job is to take that seriously enough to slow down and check. This is also why so many people miss their own warnings. They wake up unsettled, they shrug it off as a weird dream, they get in the car and go to work, and they move forward with the exact plan the dream was trying to interrupt. If dreams and visions were nothing, this wouldn't matter. But the reason this shows up so consistently across Scripture, from a man named Joseph interpreting a ruler's dream that prepared an entire nation for a coming famine, to a man named Jacob seeing a vision of heaven opened up while he slept in the middle of nowhere with a rock for a pillow, is that this channel has always been one of the primary ways guidance has entered a person's life while their defenses were down. And here's the part that should make you pay closer attention. If this channel matters that much, it also means it's a channel that can be sabotaged. Fear, chaos, unresolved stress, spiritual carelessness, all of it can turn what should be a clear signal into static. You've probably had seasons where your dreams were vivid and specific, and seasons where you couldn't remember a single one for months. That's not random. That's usually a reflection of what's going on internally, and it's worth paying attention to as a signal in itself. The second thing this gift affects is your ability to see straight through what a person is showing you on the outside. This one is harder to accept because it requires you to admit that charm, warmth, and even affection are not proof of loyalty. There's a well-known moment in the Gospels where a man walks up to Jesus in a garden at night and greets him with a kiss, a gesture that on any other night would have meant closeness and respect. That same night, that gesture was the exact signal used to identify him for arrest. A kiss. The most ordinary sign of affection turned into the mechanism of betrayal. And what's remarkable is that Jesus wasn't fooled by it for a second. He saw straight through the gesture to what was actually happening underneath it. That is sight. Not suspicion, not cynicism, but the ability to look at an action and correctly read its true source. You have probably lived a smaller version of that same moment. Maybe it was a coworker who smiled at you every single morning, complimented your work in meetings, and was quietly telling your manager a completely different story behind closed doors. Maybe it was a friend who showed up enthusiastically for the good years and mysteriously disappeared the moment things got hard for you. Most people find out who someone really is the expensive way, after the damage is already done, because they were reading the smile instead of reading the spirit behind it. The people who seem to dodge that kind of pain aren't just naturally cautious. Many of them have developed, whether they'd use this language or not, a working version of spiritual sight. They notice a gap between what someone is saying and what something in them is quietly signaling, and instead of dismissing that gap because it's inconvenient, they pay attention to it. I think about a man I heard about who had a close friend for almost a decade, the kind of friendship where you assume nothing could ever come between you. This friend was at every birthday, every hard season, every celebration, always with the right words at the right time. But over the years, in small moments he barely registered at the time, he noticed something. Every time something good happened to him, a promotion, a new relationship, a bit of recognition, this friend's congratulations came a half-second too late, and the subject changed a little too quickly. Nothing dramatic, nothing he could have pointed to and called proof of anything. Just a pattern, quiet and consistent, that something in him kept flagging even while his mind kept explaining it away. It wasn't until years later, after a falling out over something unrelated, that other people finally told him what had actually been said about him behind his back the entire time by that same friend. Looking back, he said the strangest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing he had sensed it the whole time and talked himself out of trusting what he sensed, because the friendship looked too good on the surface to argue with. That's the cost of ignoring this channel. It's rarely that you didn't see it. It's that you saw it and overruled yourself. This same gift shows up a third way, in how you read opportunity itself. And this is the one that trips up ambitious people the most, because it requires you to stop assuming that bigger, faster, and more impressive automatically means better. Picture two job offers sitting in front of you. One pays significantly more, comes with a fancier title, and everyone in your life is telling you to take it without a second thought. The other pays less, is far less flashy, but something about the first one keeps nagging at you in a way you can't fully explain on paper. Sight is what allows a person to turn down the louder offer because they sense, correctly, that inside it is something that will eventually cost them more than the extra income is worth, whether that's their integrity, their health, their family, or years of their life spent moving in the wrong direction entirely. Meanwhile, the smaller offer, the one that looked unremarkable from the outside, turns out to be exactly where the right doors, the right people, and the right growth were waiting. This isn't a promise that the humble option is always the right one, or that money is always a trap. It's simply proof that numbers and titles are not the same thing as truth, and that a person operating with real discernment weighs what they cannot yet see over what looks good on paper. The fourth and final way this shows up is in your confidence when everything around you looks like it's falling apart. There's an account in the Old Testament where a prophet's servant wakes up to find an entire enemy army surrounding the city they're in, and he panics, because from where he's standing, all he can see is overwhelming defeat. The prophet isn't panicking at all. He asks God to open the servant's eyes, and suddenly the servant sees an entire spiritual army positioned around them that was there the whole time, invisible until his sight was given the ability to register it. Nothing about the physical situation changed in that moment. What changed was his capacity to perceive what was actually surrounding him. That's the picture. The storm outside your life might be completely real. The bills, the diagnosis, the layoff, the falling apart of something you built for years, none of that gets erased. But a person with real sight can sit inside a situation that looks like collapse to everyone else and remain steady. Not because they're in denial, but because some part of them has already perceived that this is not the end of the story. So if you've made it this far, here's the honest question worth sitting with tonight. When was the last time you actually paid attention to a dream instead of shrugging it off before your coffee finished brewing? When was the last time you noticed the gap between someone's words and the feeling they left you with, and actually trusted the feeling? When was the last time you turned down something loud because something quieter in you said no, and you listened to it anyway? If it's been a while, that doesn't mean the gift is gone. It usually means it's been buried under noise, distraction, disappointment, or seasons where you got burned trusting something that turned out to be nothing, and you decided it was safer to stop listening altogether. That's a completely understandable response to pain. It's also exactly the response that keeps a person stuck, seeing nothing but the surface of their own life for years at a time. Part of why this gift goes dormant in so many people has less to do with losing it and more to do with the life most of us are living. Silence has basically disappeared. The second, there's a gap in the day. A red light, a line at the store, 5 minutes before a meeting starts. Most of us fill it instantly with a screen. That's not a moral failing, it's just the world we live in. But it comes at a cost most people never calculate. This kind of sight tends to speak in a quiet register, and quiet signals lose every single time to a phone buzzing in your hand. You cannot expect to hear something subtle while you are constantly feeding your attention, something loud. This is also worth saying plainly. None of this is a promise that paying closer attention to your dreams or your gut is going to hand you guaranteed wealth or an instantly perfect life. That's not how this works, and anyone selling you that version of it is not being honest with you. What this actually offers is something more grounded than that. Fewer blindsided moments. Fewer years spent in the wrong relationship, the wrong deal, the wrong direction, simply because you didn't notice the warning that was already available to you. That's not a small thing. For a lot of people, that single shift changes the entire shape of the next decade of their life. Getting this back isn't complicated, even if it isn't instant. It starts with slowing down enough at night to actually notice what you dreamed instead of rushing straight into your phone the second your eyes open. It starts with respecting the uneasy feeling in your gut enough to investigate it instead of talking yourself out of it because the offer looks too good to walk away from. It starts with watching what people do over time instead of only listening to what they say in the moment, because actions carry information that words are very good at hiding. None of this requires you to become paranoid or suspicious of everyone around you. It just requires you to stop assuming that having your eyes open is the same thing as actually seeing, and to start treating the quiet signals in your life as information worth taking seriously instead of noise worth ignoring. If this gave you a different way of looking at your own life, stay with me, because this channel is where I keep breaking down exactly how to read what's happening underneath the surface of your everyday decisions, your relationships, and the direction your life is actually heading. Keep watching, because the next video takes this even further, and I don't want you to miss it.